All right, we got James and Jonathan and Allison and Becca just joined us.
I'm gonna have to meet all these people in person soon because I see them online all the time. We're gonna have to be friends in real life.
So Becca just took our UX short
Yeah.
course, and she is the ever, first ever student to sign up for our career course.
Yay! Thank you.
So we're, she's making a huge life change, and it's a huge, it's a big life event for her as well as for Boca Code, right? Our
For
first.
sure.
So we're sharing in that, and if you haven't met Becca, she's also, you know, right now in the tech community, she's often referred to as Michelle's sister, right? But pretty soon she'll easily make a name for herself, and everybody will know her just as Becca, not as Michelle's sister, right?
That's right. Was it
I
okay to
don't
dive
mind
in?
so much.
What'd you say, Becca?
I said I don't mind so much. She's fantastic. So very proud
Yeah.
of her.
It's nice.
Yeah, she's a good person to be connected to. Like, it's not like you're like, oh, people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good
So
reputation.
I'll just kick us off real quick with a quick intro. So I think most of you know or know me or have just at least just met me, but I'm Todd Albert, the founder of Boca Code here in Boca Raton, Florida. And this event is part of Global Entrepreneur Week. And we're proud sponsors of the South Florida Global Entrepreneur Week, which you can get to at SoFlo GEW. Let me put it in the I'll put it in the chat in a minute. And we're also proud members of the Palm Beach Tech Association, who are also sponsors of this event, as well as South Florida Global Entrepreneur Week. So we have today Ashley Kays, who's actually one of our co-founders here at Boca Code and one of our lead instructors and content specialists and curriculum development specialists and all around amazing person and entrepreneur and coder and UX and designer and teacher and mother and all of these amazing roles that she has and has had over the years, and is probably one of the few people that you'll meet in South Florida that's been coding as long as I have. Um, you know, um, that actually is up to date on relevant technology as well. So I'm going to pass things off to Ashley and let you kick it off and take it from there.
Thank you so much, Todd. And I would say that I could definitely sing all those praises right back to you in return. I think you are the
I'm not
most
a mother.
genuinely kind, your father. And, you really look out for everybody's potential and best interest. And I'm so happy to be partnered with you. It's really like a gift from God. Okay, so let's talk user experience. Actually, let me share my screen. Nothing worse than going on and then realizing you're not sharing. Okay.
And while Ashley's getting ready, I'm just going to put it in the chat, and I'll probably put it again later. We do offer a UX short course that's starting in a couple of weeks again here at Boca Code. So I'm going to just put a link to that.
Do you guys see this block of heads here, or do I only see that?
Only you. We just see your slide.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm not covering the screen by accident. Okay, so this presentation is creating.
Sorry, Ashley, I'll watch the chat. So if people ask questions in chat, if they're like timely, I'll let you know. If otherwise, I'll try and summarize them at the end.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate that. All right, so let's dive right in. As Todd just said, my name's Ashley, and we're going to talk a little bit about the secret sauce of great user experiences. First of all, I've been doing this a long time, like Todd just said. My first tech job was when I was 15 years old. And the really cool thing about this, and what I hope all of you realize too, is that technology really doesn't care how old you are. As long as you're willing to put in the effort and learn, you can be really any age. You can be the youngest or the oldest. It really doesn't matter. You can always create ideas. And technology really gave me a voice. I was really extremely shy. I'm tall, I'm 6 feet, a little bit maybe over. And because of that, I was really quiet. But people would see what I could do with computers. And they'd be like, well, how did you do that? Would you tell me how you did that? And it really opened up a new world for me to be able to talk about what I loved. And my whole life, I've loved sharing knowledge and also learning from others. And another neat thing about being in technology is that a lot of times you get to learn about a broad base of industries. So you're going to know a little bit about pharma, you're going to know a little bit about finance, you're going to know, it's likely that you're going to learn about a lot of different industries, and it's really fun because you never ever have an opportunity to get bored. There's always something. So I've worked for companies like Disney World and NCR and Wyndham and my own agency, and now Code Teachers and Boca Code. Started Code Teachers a few years ago to teach kids to code. Started for my own daughter and son, and expanded to about 50 schools in Orlando. Now Todd has partnered with me on that, and I've partnered with him on Boca Code so we can bring education to everyone. So another thing about me is I really love pigs. This is not my pig, but it was really cute pig face. I'm from Oklahoma. I lived in the country, so country girls can also love technology and be coders. My eventual goal is to go to other countries and provide education around the world, and I can't stop buying courses and learning. I love it so much. This is my son and daughter. Both of them have really thrived from the opportunity to participate in Code Teachers. My daughter graduated when she was 15, and my son is in 9th grade, and he's only 13. So it's not in a bragging way. It's just to show that this opens doors. And if you're willing to recognize that education doesn't care how old you are, you can really do anything. So from a user experience perspective, I'm going to talk to you guys about how to create experiences to convert. But I want to tell you something that I know for a fact. And that's that there's no magic to being a user experience designer. It really boils down to a few things. One, pay attention to the world around you. Feel empathy. If you can put yourself in someone else's shoes and maybe identify the struggle or the pain points they might be facing, if you can solve a problem for someone else, you can probably solve a problem for a lot of people. And thinking through how something should flow and learning, what the best practice principles are, there's no doubt that you can do exactly the same thing that we do. And it just takes a little practice. So I just posted this quote: you've got to start with the customer experience and work backwards to the technology. That's what Steve Jobs did. I'm not sure if any of you guys have ever read Simon Sinek, but he says something similar. He basically says, start with why. And then once we understand why, we can build in everything else. His books are really good if you haven't seen them or read them. So I'm going to talk to you about the following things. One of the ways to create an engaging experience is to understand your user. That's probably the most vital piece, because I can tell you, even being a developer or being someone that's created software, sometimes you just want to solve your own problem and you create solutions for yourself, but that doesn't cover a broad enough base. We might solve the wrong problems. We might end up building features that we throw away, or we may end up making them, a disaster that we have to kind of roll back. So understanding your user is really important. Know the problem you're solving and why. Create an authentic story, something that's meaningful, because people are more likely to buy from people that they trust. And content is king. So that applies from an SEO perspective as well as from a user experience perspective. They even have user experience writers now. Craft a user journey and funnel for your planned approach for your travels through your app or site, if it's something like that. And likely that you'll create something that you can actually measure conversions for. Provide a frictionless experience. This just means don't just focus on the beauty of it, but make sure that they can actually move through it smoothly and maybe not even realize that you're in the way, just helping them get to what they need to get done. And then lastly, an engaging design never hurts. So experiences that convert. Conversion optimization is about changing, sorry, part of my screen is covered. Let me move these little guys for a second. Sorry, guys. So conversion optimization isn't about changing elements on a page. It's really about solving people's problems. If we're not converting, we're not solving problems, or we're not being found, which is a search engine issue. So it isn't just about the way something looks, which all of you obviously know. It's really about understanding the most complex system in the world, which are humans. There's all kinds of things that drive us. So we want to remove friction from a usability perspective, increase motivation from a psychology perspective, and have a great experience from a design perspective. So the great news is that you can leverage UX to create great products. And thankfully, a lot of companies realize this now. In the beginning, it was a really hard sell to convince businesses that user experience was important. Sometimes it was a hard sell to convince them that UI was important. So the difference between UX and UI really relates to the science. So user experience is really about thinking through the flows. Who's going to use this? Why are they going to use this? What am I solving? What's the hierarchy of my site structure or product structure look like? What do my users need? What kind of scenarios are they going to go through? Where have they been right before they come visit us? What are the other channels they're experiencing feel like? Are we in sync with those? Visual design is really about the colors, the psychology of colors, graphic design, making it look great, the layout so that it's easy to read and understand, typography. So they both have their place. And, if you want to know both, you're probably going to be, very, very well suited to, agency work or probably almost any role you'd like. So user experience really encompasses all the interactions with the company, its services and products. So I'm going to give you this presentation after, so I'm not going to read everything to you because I think that's boring. But the main thing I want you to know is that there's another term that's out there now, and it's been out for a long time, but it's called design thinking. And design thinking is really about thinking about and empathizing with the user first. So I heard this thing a long time ago when I was younger, and I thought it was so cool. And it said that designers are inventors. And it's really true, because when you're creating something, many times you're creating something that never existed before. So you're inventing a solution to some perceived problem or pain point. And design thinking is all about that. It's about conceptualizing, doing some research activities, and figuring out what we're trying to create and why. So it's a human-centered approach to innovation rather than just focusing on maybe from a technology or business perspective that has happened a lot in the past. So now, design thinking has gained the same respect that Agile software development, business process management, customer relationship management. It's a real term. People generally are starting to understand it, and it's definitely important in successful product development. So to really be a great design thinker, you need to really practice radical empathy. It's not just a buzzword. You really need to dive in and think about who, what, why, what does this world look like? So in this example, if you were asked to design a mid-sized sedan, what features would you put in it? But then you have to think about who's going to be using this. Does it need to have a V8 engine? Where do they live? Do they need to go up hills, snowy mountains? Is it moving soccer kids back and forth? Do they maybe feel nervous about starting to move into a minivan or a mid-sized sedan? Is this an uncomfortable shift for them? How do we make it feel cool? So it's kind of thinking through these types of questions. And we do the same thing in software. So there's all kinds of ways to ask questions that we can get unbiased answers to and kind of crunch it together to do some testing before we dive in. So it'll lead to better products and services. So the first question we should always ask, unless your boss just tells you have to do it, is what's the human need behind this? And even if your boss just says do it because I said so, it's still really important to understand the human need, because you can end up being their best advocate and really helping make sure that the right questions are asked at the right times. So this design thinking process includes the following phases. It looks a little different than the standard design methodology. A lot of this is focused on understanding, exploring, conceptualizing. So these are what the phases look like, and I'm going to walk you through it. Then a very important thing to keep in mind with everything that we do now is really trying to take as agile of an approach as possible. If we just design in a vacuum and then later hand it off and don't revisit that at all, we probably won't end up with a product much better than if we hadn't asked questions at all. It's really important that we, iterate and test and continue to improve what we're building within reason of the budget, of course. So there's this whole convergent and divergent thinking, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, but there's certain places where at first you're just kind of, you're thinking of the challenge you want to solve, and then later you're just kind of thinking about, well, how do I solve this? And you just allow yourself to think creatively. So this is the design process that as a designer, I've always followed, except it's iterative now. So it's called the double design approach. And basically it's about discovering what's the insight to the problem, what are we fixing, what are we going to build, how are we going to deliver it. And this is a very standard process that a lot of designers follow. So what I recommend is that you incorporate design thinking and the design process together into an agile approach. So why are we making this? How can we effectively do this? Who is this for? So as I've kind of beat into your heads already, we just need to understand our user and make it about the user or the customer. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to identify the pain our prospect is experiencing right now. When we do that, we're going to then continue to identify their emotional drivers. Once we have a good idea of that, we can start to get an idea of what we're going to build, what we're going to say, how we're going to reach this person from an emotional perspective. Because if we want to find out what our emotional drivers are because that's really what converts. Emotion is what converts. They need to know why this matters to them, how this is going to benefit them, get this done, maybe it's going to make them feel great because it gives them stature. Maybe it's going to help them because they just need to pay a bill. But whatever it is, we need to understand the emotional drivers and help them move through the process. So here's some of the steps we can take to do this. We can run surveys. If you have chat on your site, you can start to get ideas about what are the issues that users are experiencing frequently, the support tickets. You can look at the Google Analytics and see, are people falling off at certain pages? Are they maybe getting bored or getting lost? Looking at heat maps. So these are all things that relate more to a site or app perspective, but these are ways that you can really make sure that you understand your user and that you're solving the right problem. And then looking at competitors as well. And of course, interviewing real customers when you can. So if you identify and address the roadblocks and identify their desired emotional outcome, likely they're going to choose you. So your goal is to show people on the page that your solution can transform them into that better version of themselves. For example, it's not how many calories a Coke has or what glass the bottle is made of. It's about the fact that opening a bottle of Coke means opening happiness. So, they've created an experience and, it works, it sticks with you. So you don't have to be a huge brand or have a huge budget to create an emotional connection with customers. You just have to show them what's in it for them. So, for example, if you use our product, this poor, long-suffering, underappreciated marketer will be admired by his peers and managers for these amazing reports they're able to deliver in these conversions. An overworked, tired, frustrated father or mother could become more loving and tolerant and accepting because he's learning to meditate with your new app. An overwhelmed, anxious campaign manager could gain confidence and control by taking your course. It's really about understanding what's the better version of themselves your customer or client is looking for to make them feel that you're going to provide that solution. So part of that is understanding human needs and mapping the journey so that we understand what they're trying to do. So we've talked a lot about understanding the user, and this is one of the things that's important to do. I do this all the time for code teachers, and I believe Todd does this as well. We're starting to do this with Boca Code. When we're writing a story or when we're writing a post, we're always talking to the same person. So we're creating a persona that is not ourselves, that has certain needs, emotional needs, physical needs, whatever they are, and we are making sure that that is who we're communicating with and that is who we're building for. So you may say, well, how do I build this? Well, the best source of information for creating customer personas is your customers. You need to survey them. So you may say, well, I don't have any customers yet. Okay, you could do user testing, or if you don't have that option or the budget for that, the other thing that you can do is something called proto personas. So basically, it's not as informed, it's not as deep on data, but you can go through and we can create a couple of, 2-3 examples of who we are targeting, what their needs are, why, and really use them as the person that we're communicating with and solving problems for, so that we never lose track of Anna as we're working on our system, or Casey, or whoever it is. And we make sure that we're always speaking to them, because then when they read our messaging, it's going to be it's going to feel similar regardless of how we're communicating, whether it's social or website. So another thing to think about when we're looking at our personas is that they're different, so we need to think about the needs of each type. For example, when I used to work for NCR, sometimes we had to think about things when we were doing bank, we wanted to make it fast. People may not feel safe. They just want to get their money. They don't want their balance to be displayed. Maybe someone's older. Maybe they're trying to deal with a struggling child that's trying to get away. Someone's standing too close. There's all these things to think about. And how do we make it easy? So we're thinking about their needs. And there's all different types of personas. You can draw it on paper. You can have something pretty like these. The point is to understand who you're talking to. And once you understand this, well, like I mentioned, you could do surveys to gain some insight. Once you understand that, the next thing that you're going to start to think about is what type of information do you want to collect to make your next decisions. Sometimes you don't have a big budget and you have to take shortcuts. I understand that. I don't always get to do all of these things, but when you can, each of these bring certain value. So business case requirements, I mean, we really almost can't survive without that. If we don't know what we're trying to build, you know, likely it's going to be reworked many times over. And we're going to have, if you're an agency, you're going to have incredible scope creep because you're not going to have anything solid that you're able to say is complete. User personas, we just talked about. User journey shows what they were doing, what they're doing on their site, what they're going to do next. We'll look at that. So there's lots of different tools. Service maps are very in-depth. I always bare minimum have requirements, some sort of idea of a persona, user journey, even if it's a light level, wireframes, user flow. You know, it's almost any content strategy if I can be part of that and promote it. Those are, you know, you almost can't survive without them, at least not building a successful product. So empathy mapping, like we talked about a bunch of times, it's seeing their world, thinking about what they're dealing with. Sympathy is not the same as empathy. So we're not feeling sorry for them. You know, like, oh, I'm so sorry that this person can't see. How am I going to make their life better? It's not really that. It's really understanding that they can't see and how do we make this experience easier for them so that this page can be read to them or, you know, they can perform this transaction they need to perform. And when we're doing an empathy map, it's really thinking through thinking, feeling. These are really fun to do with it in a group. If you have a team to do it with, you just write down on Post-its, okay, what are they seeing? What are they thinking? What are they hearing? And then you can kind of put this together and create a fun map. And it really gets you kind of talking and thinking through, you know, what you're trying to solve. So the user journey or flow, this is where you create a visualization of every interaction a customer has with your company, behind the scenes, front and center, anything that you can think of so that you can overserve your customers and exceed their expectations, because then they're really going to feel understood. There's lots of different types of journey maps. Some look like this. Some look like this. This is an example of Starbucks. So in this case, this person wants some coffee. They're just like frustrated. I want my coffee. It's hot in my car. The AC is too slow. I found a decent parking spot. Okay, yeah, it smells good. The coffee's great. So this is the only thing that Starbucks can really control, this middle section here. But being cognizant of these first areas, you can do things like mobile ordering, et cetera, to solve problems. And, you know, understanding what they were doing before and after helps you, you know, create a great experience, especially if you're doing consumer experience, which is, you know, sometimes even choreographing the flow directly to the front of the line at a bank, or, you know, ride management at Disney World. You know, all of these things are still user experience. It's just another type. Journey mapping. So like I said before, content is king. This is true for so many reasons. This is where we get to tell our story. This is how we show that we're authentic. And this is how, if we're a site, for example, we make sure that we rank. So really thinking through our content strategy and the messaging and the story, it's really one of the most vital parts that you can have for conversion. So if we tell stories that convert, how do we do that? Write story for your audience. What's the hook? Visuals that complement each other. Leave them wanting more. Like, don't tell them everything. For example, you know, if I do a webinar, I'm not going to teach them every single thing they're going to learn in the class because I need them to sign up for the class. And it's not that I want to take anything from anyone. It's just the nature of staying in business, you know, and also not overfilling their minds. Show them just enough so they're like, oh, I can't wait. I got to take this class, you know, or whatever it is. And then when in doubt, just follow the classic dramatic structure, similar to the way that you would write a story. So this is an example of Todoist. Millions are doing amazing things with Todoist, the world's most powerful to-do list. So it sounds cool, you know, I want to do amazing things, so maybe I should get Todoist. For today's social consumer, storytelling is a critical part of your conversion toolbox. Not everybody knows how to do it. It takes work, but if you get it right, you're going to see conversions. Improving your ability to merge storytelling into your products will show conversion. So you got to get everyone on board. So this is one of the biggest things that I always see as an issue for companies I've worked for when I'm a consultant or just working somewhere, like, for example, NCR. Many times people are working in silos. User experience is working over here, design is working over here, development's working over here. Well, not only is that not going to create a great experience, it's also not going to create great synergy toward the product that you're creating. So it's really important to create developers on board. And where you can, especially if you're the leader, create a culture of engaged employees, because then they're going to help promote your user experience as well, because it's a great customer experience. I say that honestly, it is completely vital to include developers in the discovery process. If you don't, you're going to spend time educating them later, or you're going to refactor things because you're going to have created things for technology they can't support. So it's important that we include tech and developers in our planning. Otherwise, we're going to start over and we're going to have a lot of explaining to do to each other. So if we can work together with the user in mind and determine the need and feasibility, we're going to create accountability. So this was one of the main things that happened when I started at NCR. I was so excited to do this because when I went there, a lot of my job was psychology, trying to convince this team that this team didn't like them. Designers, the developers aren't trying to mess up your beautiful designs. Developers, the designers aren't trying to create things that you can't build. So because I was in charge, I said, what we're going to do is from now on, we're doing all these discovery sessions together, because yes, it's going to cost more upfront in man hours in meetings, but we're going to save so much time on refactoring later and finger pointing. And it really worked. People, right away we could say, hey, is this technically feasible? I'm not sure. Let me check on that. But tomorrow's meeting, I'll be able to tell you. Let me get back to you on that. Now, when they commit to it, they're locked in. It's not on you for designing something they can't build. It's a team effort. So I think it's crucial for business success, not just me, but many people do. Technology, business, human needs, and design innovation. There's that sweet spot. Another thing about conversions is personalizing your website and product. We have so many ways to personalize now. We understand our users. Creating an experience that's just for them is going to make them feel understood, and you're probably going to be able to dazzle them in some way. So another important part, this is how you're going to be able to measure what's working and what's not working, and keep nurturing your users. Create a sales and user funnel. So you're going to think through, how are they flowing into my site? Where are they coming from? Okay, they interacted with something. I'm going to email them. Oh, they didn't respond back. Let me follow up. Obviously we don't want to overwhelm them or inundate them with things, but there's lots of tools to help us plan a successful funnel that will allow you to measure conversions and also find where you can improve, points of conversion. Like, for example, oh, they're forgetting we exist because, we never emailed them again. So let's nurture them. Or they bought something. Let's remind them we sell other things, So this is a little tool here. It's called Funnel Flows. I've used a bunch of different ones. There's one called Keep. There's Infusionsoft. There's a bunch of them. But basically, they help you map out your user experience. And sometimes it actually is automated. Once you build it, it does the work for you. Sometimes you can just kind of simulate it and know what's going to happen. And other tools let you actually build it out and make it functional. I think Ashley Taylor is using one called Demio, I think it is. I think it has the funnel part in it. I know she's using that for webinars. Anyway, this is another example. It looks a little bit scary, but it's really not. It's just what happens, the different pages and what's going to happen. Sometimes there's an email, sometimes there's a phone call. They're just planning out what's going to happen. So I mentioned this earlier. This relates to the modes of thinking. Sometimes you have the need just to be creative. And people say, oh, I'm not creative. I can't think of ideas. It's actually not true. You just need to give yourself time to just think without any barriers. And that's called divergent thinking. And as we're moving through this process of user experience, there's different times when we're just supposed to be creative. And then there's times when we're just supposed to be logical, like when we're building our flows or we're figuring out, the wireframes and what's happening with our users. That's really, logical. We don't want to send them off on a, somewhere that we can't help them. But divergently, we want to be able to think, well, what if we didn't have a CD player? And what if we could stream music? Whatever it is, we want to be able to think of ways to solve the problem. So divergent thinking is really during the discover and develop phases, solving problems creatively. Convergent thinking is really when you're doing define and deliver. You need to be very logical. It needs to follow a certain process. So in a nutshell, we need to understand, I'm not done yet though, so don't think you're getting off yet. We need to understand, define, and when we define, we're thinking about the problem statement and probably going to deliver some sort of report back so that developers know what to build. During ideation, depending on which design process you're using, sometimes this occurs during define, sometimes this occurs during ideate. But the point is we're going to deliver these kind of artifacts, sketches, or, you know, digital designs of what you're creating, the user flow, which is how the user moves between your interface, user stories, which are what you're asking to occur or what they're going to build. Storyboards are applicable in some cases. Sometimes that's a wireframe, sometimes it's a storyboard. Mood boards for design, where it kind of represents the feeling that you want to create in colors, etc. So wireframes look like these, very helpful, save a lot of time because it doesn't take as much time to build these as it does to build higher fidelity. So low fidelity, you can draw it really quick. You can sketch it on paper or create it in a quick tool like Figma or UX Pen. Visual design takes a little more work. This was another example, I think, of, oh yeah, so user flows, that one's too fast, sorry. But that's a tool out there that's pretty cool. More examples of wireframes, flow diagrams. So in the beginning, when I first create a flow for a product, I will map it out just like this. And then as time goes on, I'll start to replace the boxes with screens and then the interactions and the, you know, and then eventually at some point it becomes this Bible of how the system's going to operate. And another thing that I like to do to save time is think through which pages are very similar. If it's a website, for example, or a software product, you know, many times there's certain pages that are going to be very similar with different information, like a form or things like that. And if you can distill it down to a few core templates, you can, one, make sure it's very consistent, two, provide it faster to the developers, and three, you know, make sure you understand, you know, the how to potentially make it, well, I said consistent already, but just so the user knows what to expect. So prototyping is another very helpful part of user experience design. It's not hard to prototype. You can literally paper prototype where you trade sheets out and, you know, they think through how to move through a system. You can also have clickable wireframes or high fidelity prototypes. All of them have their purpose, and generally the higher the budget, the higher the fidelity, but they do bring a lot of value because sometimes you will think that it's obvious and it isn't. So if you prototype it and do some user testing, you can discover very quickly what works and what doesn't work. I remember one interface I was working on for a bank. We wanted to do this really cool thing. We just thought it was so creative that you would see the money on the screen and then you would just tap to add more money. But we tested it and they didn't know what to do. They're like, how do I get my money? They were just staring at the screen like, I don't understand how to increase the value here. So we very quickly realized that, yeah, it was kind of cute, but didn't work in real life. And there are a bunch of other things like that too. The way we would ask them if they wanted 20s or 50s, you know, different design challenges that we were solving, sometimes our assumptions were wrong. So although it's a little disappointing, it's very good to know sooner rather than later. So that really comes down to testing, usability, analytics. If it's Google, you know, you want to understand kind of what's happening with your users. There's lots of ways to do this. Some tools like UX Pen will let you record users interacting with your system. User testing, this is very helpful when you want to answer, when you test an assumption. So let's say we're going to build a new course. I'm going to go on and I'm going to ask recruiters, what skills are they looking for right now? What's the most in demand? So I can make sure that our course is going to cover those skills. And then I might ask bootcamp students, what did you feel was great about your bootcamp? What did you feel was missing? Or I might ask recent hires, what do you wish you knew when you started this job? But all of that information can come together to create a pretty comprehensive look into what should be covered from a course perspective. You can do the same thing for a product. Sometimes you can even just test a screen. So maybe, for example, you want to get an idea of if they like the look and feel or understand that something's a button. You can use, you know, user testing tools for that. Usability testing is making sure a user understands it and also making sure that we're thinking about accessibility. So, and then from a design perspective, this is where we're really thinking about the aesthetics, the look and feel. Not all user experience designers are visual designers. There is a distinction. Some do both, some don't. So this would sometimes be handed off to another team member. Same with develop. Some UX experience designers are front-end designers as well. Some are not. They would be handed off to the development team. And some development teams require assets to be delivered in code, like I just mentioned, front end. Some require red lines where it's all marked up and measured. In all cases, it's always helpful to give a style guide. So now let's dive in a little bit more. So when we want to understand the human need and incorporate good sound thinking, one of the first things that we want to do is we want to make sure that we understand the user's mental model. We want to make sure we don't break it. So what is a mental model? It's how we think something should work. So for example, if we are looking for a save button and we can't find it, we've broken the mental model because they are expecting to see some sort of save or download, something that they can do to make sure this file is not lost. And there's certain standards that users have grown accustomed to. You can introduce new things, but I wouldn't introduce too many because then you're going to have a lot of work to help users understand how to move through your system. So they have something called positive effect. And this is about creating interactions that are more interesting and playful, and they engage people intellectually and emotionally. So examples of that are a bank or phone company that delivers a statement that provides insight about your behavior so that you can actually use it to think about how to set goals for your budget, for example. Like, oh, I really want to go to Hawaii. If the bank sent me, well, if you spent $10 less, you would have, enough money to go to Hawaii at the end of the year. Just kind of interesting ways to create unusual experiences. Synchronizing the channels is important. We receive information from a lot of different sources: Facebook, billboards, ads, TV. Make sure that your channels are consistent so that they understand you, and who they're buying from. Affordance is very important. This is really about how they use it. So you want to give cues that communicate meaning, not meetings. Affordances are part of a system that allow us to interact with the system, and they look like this. So we know what to expect if we touch hot. We know what to expect if we turn cold. We've learned how to interact with this interface for the iPhone. Another thing that we want to do is we want to make sure we don't confuse our users. So, it's kind of like, do not enter only. It's like, I don't understand what you're asking me to do. Opt out. No, I don't want to subscribe. Yes, can subscribe. It's confusing. So you want to make sure that your messaging and your error messages are as clear as possible. You also want to make sure that what you want the user to do is very visible. So by looking at your screen even quickly, they should be able to quickly understand what to do next. So for example, we know here where the gear shifter is, it's pretty obvious over here how to pick colors. Just want to make it very easy. Providing feedback is very important because it allows you to quickly help them resolve errors. So for example, just make sure that it's very clear. Mapping. So where am I now and where can I go? So helping users understand what to do, and these are just some examples, but I would say, like, for example, breadcrumbs or things like that, so they know what's going to happen. And then if there are constraints in the system, let them know that there's a constraint, such as you didn't enter your email. Same as we were talking about the errors. You can only go reverse neutral drive. It's pretty clear what you can do. We mentioned this one already, but it's consistency. So this is really making sure that they don't have to relearn as they're moving through your product. They shouldn't have a totally new experience as they move around. And also, we don't want to break the mental model. They understand what minimize, close, save, back. There's certain patterns for that. Another important aspect is accessibility. Not only is it important because we want to make sure we're designing for humans, but it's also sometimes the law. If, for example, when we were doing compliance in Canada, when I worked there, you cannot provide anything to a sighted person that a blind person can't also complete. So there's quite a few things that you have to think about to make sure that your product is accessible, especially if it's something crucial like finance or utility or something like that. So it's really about accommodating characteristics that a person can't change. They can't change the fact they're blind, unfortunately. So we need to be able to make it easy for them to still operate and use our system. So, some of the things we might think about are making it easy for everyone to use, forgiving an error, if somebody's not making it too easy to error, low physical effort potentially. So it's really about function before fashion. And when we are designing for accessibility, we can check the latest rules with 508 compliance, if it's a website, for example. And we can also, kind of think through what is it like? They can't see, can't hear, can't move, don't have, the same cognition that we have. Some things, we might be hard to accommodate, but the best that we can, addressing those. So this is included because this is an example of a website that you really can't read. It might be pretty in some ways, but that font is certainly not accessible in that color. So it's not going to be 508 compliant. Another thing that you want to think through is how easy it is to use. So it might be pretty, but would grandma know how to use it? Does everyone get this? Because if they don't, you're only hurting your own interactions unless you only want to serve a certain audience. For me, I don't mind if any age wants to get the product that I'm selling. Another thing is, that we have so much noise in all of our channels right now, just so many signals coming at us. If we can really just streamline it down, distill it down to what we want them to do, we're going to make a better experience because it's going to be very clear. We're not going to have as much support or training. They're just going to know what to do. So thank you so much. I'm going to let you guys ask questions and tell you a few more things, but these are some of Boca Code's partners.
That slide's old. We've got a bunch more.
We have a bunch more. See, that's an old one. Sorry, Dodd. If we want our users to like our software, we should design it to behave like a likable person, respectful, generous, helpful. And this is our team. We actually have a couple more. Sorry, Michelle's not on here because I had an old slide. I'm sorry, Todd. So don't look at that one too hard. So that's in a nutshell how you create an experience that converts. Let me stop sharing for a second. I can see you all again. So
we've got our first question in the chat from Steven Sponder. Yeah, okay. Do you have a preferred prototyping tool for building mobile apps?
So there are so many good ones, to be honest. I've tried so many that I like. Figma is a very, very, very good design tool. What's great about Figma is that not only is it free, it's very easy to collaborate. You can create interactions so you can test it responsively. It's a really great tool. I would say a good runner-up would be a tool called Just in Mind. I love that one because you can actually send it to your phone and click around. You can do the same thing on Figma, by the way. You can mirror it to your phone and interact with it and test it. And it's very exciting to see it come to life. Since you asked that, let me share my screen one more time. So this is Figma, and it has become one of the most popular design tools, even more popular than Sketch and Photoshop at the moment, and I think Adobe XD. So if you were going to create something, you would just very simply go into a new project, and then you do something called create an artboard, which is just hitting A, and then you'd immediately say what type of device you're creating for. So in this case, you said phone. Lucky you, there's many types of phones, so you got to think through that when you're doing mobile design. But in this case, I'm going to choose this one. And if you notice, over here is this play icon. That allows you to present it, but you can also prototype. You can share it with pretty much anyone you want, and you can actually also work on a file at the same time. Lots of really helpful, useful things. There's libraries that you can bring in, plugins.
It's also really cool, like collaborating in Figma because it's on the web. You can actually like both be working on a file at once, Stephen. And like, if I'm dragging something around, Ashley will actually see my cursor with my name and it'll show what I'm doing. And, Mariella could be working over here and Ashley's over here and I'm over here and we're all moving things around and seeing what we're doing on the screen. It's very good. But there, my opinion is that while I agree completely with Ashley that Figma's like by far one of the most popular. It also depends a little bit on your workflow. Like if you're really into the Creative Cloud and you're really an Illustrator and Photoshop user, then using Adobe XD is pretty easy to to move between those systems. They're all, I mean, Sketch is incredible.
It is.
But Figma's really excellent for prototyping. And then there was another question in the chat from Mark.
There was one more thing I was going to say, if you don't mind, on that same topic. sometimes the client or the company will have a certain mandate on the software, to be honest. I've worked at several places that require Azure. So if you're starting out and you want to make sure that you have the right skill set or, tool list covered for your career, I definitely would at least make sure you have an awareness of OmniGraffle and Azure, because a lot of large corporations use those. So you can always sell them on the idea to use your tool once you get there. But sometimes, you're going to be joining a team that already has artifacts in place. And those are two extremely popular ones. Axure, not Azure, I'm thinking Microsoft. Axure is the one that, for example, when I worked at Wyndham, they require it. And it's an extremely robust tool for corporate, just to be honest. And you can import from Sketch and things like that. So look around at the job, at the jobs that you're interested and see what they're using if you want to go work for someone, for example. Sorry,
Yes.
next question.
So then Mark asked, what do you think is something that new UX UI designers fail at most often or are confused by?
So I think a few things. One, I think that a lot of user experience designers think this is a lot more complicated than it is. I don't think that user experience design is actually that complicated, because we're really working to understand someone. So if we can understand the best practices and the types of artifacts to deliver, you're going to be able to be a very valuable contributor to a team very quickly. On the UI side, I think a mistake that a lot of people do is they forget or they don't know to use a grid, because anyone can create a beautiful design if you follow the golden ratio. So for example, if you use a grid, you're going to be able to create a good design. But I think a lot of new designers, you can tell when it's over decorated, or there's 5 different things in the logo and you're kind of like, well, just pick one, or too many fonts. A newbie generally overdoes it a little bit, in my opinion. What do you think, Todd?
Yeah, I think that, again, like you said earlier, it comes down to talking to your developers, right?
Yeah.
So like a project that we were just working on with one of our partners, Premier Virtual, finding out that they're using Material UI, and then when you're doing the designs, you're using Material UI components, things like that. So just having that regular communication with your development team can be really useful. And I've had that where my designers were doing crazy things and not following a grid, and then the developers were struggling to build what they designed. Then again, for the Boca Code website, I challenged my designer for that website to like break the rules, right? Yeah. Don't design in a grid, which gave Mariella, who built the site, a giant headache, but also a great challenge and great fun, which she was up to. Yeah, so Jonathan Sanchez asks, what's your go-to app for wireframing?
Okay, I'll show you that in one second.
Balsamic used to be like the go-to app, but I don't hear about Balsamic anymore.
I still use it sometimes for quick, easy, make it look like a sketch type of interactions. There was one more thing I wanted to say on the last one, and then I'll do that. If you want to become really great at user experience or design, UI, look around at what you see out there that's great. That's what I do all the time. I mean, I remember even when I was younger, I would constantly pay attention to movie titles, the intros, the screens, the coloring, I'd notice fonts, and anytime I saw something that I really liked, if it was something physical, like a paper, I would clip it out and I'd put it in something kind of like an inspiration book. There's also quite a few books on that show great examples of design, like great websites. There's also several websites, of course, Dribble, Behance, and then Pattern, where you can literally go on and say, what's the best pattern for this issue? I have this problem where I want my user to be able to log in, and I have more than one type of user. So I want them either to sign in as a freelancer or as a company. How do we show both on the screen without making it confusing? So you can go and find a pattern for that out on the web. Okay, and then go to wireframing tool. I'm getting used to using Figma for the same reason that I just mentioned, prototyping. Previously, my go-to was UX Pen. I loved that one. Or sometimes OmniGraffle, because NCR required OmniGraffle. So I really grew to love it because you can create some beautiful really beautiful design wireframes in OmniGraffle. When I worked at Wyndham, they required I use Axure. I didn't like it as much, but it was very robust as well. And when they would buy wireframes, generally they were like $100,000. So we were required to provide it however they wanted them to look. And you know, we spent a lot of time on that fidelity, on a lot of time tweaking that low fidelity design before we moved it on. So it depends on budget, company you're working with, and what you like. If I'm just creating product for myself, I might literally just draw it on paper and use that as a reference, honestly. If I'm communicating it to a client, I'd probably use Figma because I know I could share it easily and talk to them, and it's new and it's free, and you know.
I agree that I think almost in most cases starting on paper
Yeah.
is the best. And that's, I know something that, you know, Emily, who's teaching our UX short course, she does an exercise where everyone starts by sketching it out on paper. And then we move it into, you know, building up towards that prototype. So I really recommend that. Our next question, if you're ready, is a two-parter from Kevin Cannon. He asks what your opinion on Storybook JS is, and if you've faced any pain points while using Storybook.
Let me double check. Yeah, so there are a lot of tools like this. This one is not one that I've been using so far that I can think of. I was trying to think off the top of my head if this was one that I was working with recently. I don't think so. But you know what I'll do is I'm going to give it a little bit of a look and look around and hear what some people are saying about it. And I'm going to come back to you if you don't mind putting your email in the chat. But it looks very interesting. I've seen several like this and used some. This looks pretty cool. So I'm going to check it out.
Yeah, another one that's being developed out by some really brilliant people out in Silicon Valley is called Plasmic. Kevin, it's definitely worth checking out. I think it's a little different than Storybook, but it's specifically for React. So I think it really depends on you know, what you're developing in. Whereas Storybook is great for Vue, React, and a few other you know, a few other technologies. Plasmic is really more for React, but these are like hardcore developers and UX people building it, and it uses some AI to help, like, you basically design out your components and it actually builds them in React and allows like reusable React components that it creates. It's a lot of other programs have tried that, but Plasmic is it looks pretty legit. I've played with it a bit. But, you know, I'm kind of a purist. I tend to build stuff by hand and then let Mariella make it look pretty.
I wanted to show you something really quickly, and I know there's going to be another question, but I just want to show you something. Open this, share. So I mentioned to you the flow diagrams, and I wanted to show you a couple examples. So in this case, this is something that I was creating for National Bank of Canada. So in this case, very simply started just with a transactional flow, like what are they doing? And once we figured out what they were doing, I want to show you how this ended up evolving. One second. So as we start to build out the system, we'll build a more comprehensive flow. And this also helps us make sure that we have all the scenarios covered. So in this case, I'm doing the voiceover architecture. So for blind, how are they going to interact with the system? I'm not sure why this is blurry like this. I don't know. But anyway, that simple transactional flow ends up starting to include first wireframes. I might even have some in here still in this example, maybe not. First includes wireframes, and then later the high fidelity mockups. And then at some point, you know, it can serve as a guide for the development team and also a guide for the business to check off that, you know, that things are covered and make sense. And also, you know, that certain error scenarios or interactions are covered.
Yeah,
I just wanted to show you that. Any other questions?
I think that's it. Awesome. If anybody has any last questions, now's your speak now or forever hold your peace. Otherwise, thank you so much, Ashley. This was awesome. I appreciate you giving this talk for us. And you know, I think for those of you who got to see, like, Ashley's worked on some pretty amazing systems before. You know, Steven Sponder's realizing he really needs to hire up some UX. So you know, we'll definitely talk if you need some help in that regards. But I thank you again. I hope you guys, you know, enjoy the rest of Global Entrepreneur Week. I'm giving a talk on pricing your freelance work at 3 o'clock today, I believe. So please check that out and join us. And you know, I thank you again. And please, you know, consider taking our UX short course if this is something you want to learn more about, or you know, reach out to us if you want to learn more about the school, the technology, or just even help finding somebody to, you know, work on your project. Thanks so much, and thanks, Ashley, and
Yeah.
hope you
Thanks
guys
for coming, for the support. Take care, everybody. Bye.
bye.
Have a great day.